The Galen Hour, Season 2, Episode 5. The impact of climate change and ways we can reduce our carbon footprint. Joining us tonight are Dr. Kenrick Williams, CEO of the Ministry of Sustainable Development, Climate Change and Disaster Risk Management, and Aidan Leslie, President of the Environmental Club at Galen University.
Good night and welcome to another episode of the Galen Hour. This is Season 2, Episode 5, and we're talking about the impact of climate change and ways to reduce our carbon footprints. We have two very interesting guests on with us tonight. We look forward to the topics that we'll be talking about. The Galen Hour is a production of Galen University. It talks about sustainable development, academic excellence, and lifelong learning. I'm your host, Diana Gomez-Perry-Feet. And I am pleased to be here with you every Thursday night. Since curfew, we've changed our time to 7:30. So it is a pleasure to be here. We'll take a short break and we'll be right back with the 5th episode of the Galen Hour.
I chose Galen because of its strong reputation.
Great scholarships.
I came because I can take all my classes online.
It is what I need to take me where I want to go.
I am very grateful for the wide range of support that helps me to do my utmost best.
Everything from peer mentoring, tutoring, student services, and the e-library.
I like the way my professors use non-traditional activities to evaluate my progress.
If you want to connect with your inner champion and make the world a better place, then Galen is right for you.
To learn more about our various programs, visit our website at www.galen.edu.bz or email us at admissions@galen.edu.bz.
And come soar with the Galen Eagles.
And we're back with another episode of the Galen Hour. Welcome. Thank you for joining us tonight. It's always a pleasure to be here with us. And with you, thank you. So we have with us tonight Dr. Kenrick Williams, who's the CEO in the Ministry of Sustainable Development, Climate Change and Disaster Risk Management. Welcome, Dr. Williams. We also have joining us tonight Aidan Leslie, who's the President of the Environmental Club at Galen University. Aidan is a third-year student at the university, majoring in environmental science. Welcome, Aidan.
Thank you, Ms. Diana.
Gentlemen, it's a pleasure to have you on with us tonight. This is such a timely topic. There's a lot going on in the news, in the world, with respect to climate change. We know there's a big UN meeting coming up shortly, and our country is preparing for that. And we'll touch on that topic a little later on in tonight's conversation. But I wanted to talk certainly about climate change, but also about how climate change is impacting the most vulnerable sectors in our country. We do know that we are a developing nation state and we have our own challenges. So we wanted tonight to ensure we just touch on that and to see how we're doing as a country in that regard. But we hear the term climate change so often, and I wanted to start by asking you all to tell our viewing audience, what is climate change?
Well, good evening, Diane. Good evening to your viewing audience, and thank you very much for having me on the show. It's really good to see Galen really taking lead in sharing the discussion with the students and with the public, because I think climate change is a critical discussion. So to really take off from your first question, which is the basics, what is climate change? As is entrenched in the term, right? It's a change of climate. It's a change in the weather patterns, change in temperature over time. Importantly is that this change occurs over time and not within short periods. So it's looking at that gradual change over time and the impact of that change on communities, on ecosystems, on people, and our climatic system. And essentially then the discussion is around that. How has this change within the short period of time impacted our communities, impacted our coastlines, impacted or various economic sectors. And so that is a key focus of this discussion now. No?
Thank you. So yes, we're talking about the impact of climate change, and it is a change that has happened over time. What has caused this change? Why is our climate changing?
The climate change is largely attributed to human activities. Really, what we're seeing is as a result of since Industrial Revolution and a change in human behavior, right? So we're all flying more, we're eating more because of our economic influence. We're doing all of these things, increased production because of technology. All of these things is really causing the release of carbon dioxide, increased carbon dioxide into our atmosphere. And as a result of that increased carbon dioxide into our atmosphere, we're influencing the weather, temperature, and patterns. Essentially, then, because of the human influence in those changes, then we're getting the effects such as global warming, such as sea level rise, such as increased temperature, such as increased pests and diseases on agriculture. And so that is sort of the ripple effects of what is happening in the human or anthropogenic influences over time that have impacted our weather or climate and our people.
And what we have to put into perspective too, Dr. Williams, is that it has been such a rapid change since then. I mean, it's what, like the projections that we've seen, it's like since the last decade, it's so quick, you know, like, and that's what we really have to think about. It's not like it's been happening over the past couple centuries. It's really quick that this has been going on, you know.
Very, very true, Aidan, and that's the issue at hand here. So naturally, our climate changes, right? The issue at hand here is that this change, because of human influences, have happened within just a short time. That is increasing the impacts. That is increasing the changes in the weather patterns, and we can look at some of the changes that the data have shown us in Belize, for example. We've seen that since 1960, the last major hurricane, our temperature in Belize, the data is showing us that temperature has already increased by 1 degree Celsius. Now, because of that very short time, 50 years, we're seeing an increase of 1 degree Celsius. And again, this is just Belize, right? Then that can be attributed to some of the localized change that we're seeing in this country. And that is telling us, that's only telling us the impact that we're going to see in the future as our influences increase, right? As our affluence increase as a country, as a globe, as a region.
I mean, definitely you talk about temperature. You can't tell me now is not hotter than when I was like 40 years ago or so when we were children. I mean, you walk outside and you feel like the sun is burning through your skin. And I mean, and there's just a difference. So we may very well be talking about how hot it is. And yes, Belize is a hot country, but we can see the changes. And if we look in our news, we see erosion of beaches. We see, right. I mean, things are happening that we're just maybe ignoring. And so it's really good that we have forums and that we continue to bring this into the limelight. It really is an issue. So 1 degree Celsius might sound like a little bit, but I believe the impact of a degree Celsius change in temperature is huge.
It's
right?
It's very huge. And you just said it, we're seeing the impacts of that, right? We can, within our own lifetime, talk about and reflect on the changes in temperature, in weather, in climatic patterns. We see droughts, we see changes. We know the rainy season was from this time to this time, and the dry season was from this time to this time in Belize. But now we're seeing a variation in those patterns. We can't really tell exactly because of the changes that we're seeing within short times. And that is already impacting communities. So we know, for example, within our Mayan communities, you plant your corn just before the start of the rainy season and stuff like that. But because of the change, then we're seeing, and they cannot tell really when is the rainy season starting, because sometimes you have an early rainy season, then you have a huge drought, then the rainy season starts again. That is impacting these communities. And so you're seeing that throughout the various sectors, throughout the various communities.
Yeah, so the weather seems to have gotten a little bit erratic. Yep,
right.
Definitely. So it makes it that much more difficult for us to plan, particularly farmers. And, you know, we don't, some of us, we go along our lives and we don't realize this. We don't realize that to the hat, you can't tell tomorrow and rain, but this has serious impact for our farmers and for agriculture sector, you know, as well as, of course, for our people who depend on tourism and all of that. So good. So I wanted to
excuse me, Miss Diana. I was going to mention that I've been hearing talk from people that, oh, we're in October, but I'm outside sweating so much, it's so hot. We're in October and we feel like this. We're getting this kind of like heat and stuff, you know. It's just crazy. We were supposed to be having these kind of days during the summer, and now we're in a time for sweaters, and we don't need that because we sweat anyways. So like, right, things like this, it's so obvious, right? These impacts that we're feeling, but yet some people still don't like realize these impacts, right? And that's why we have to get this out there to them, have these discussions, educate them about stuff like this, right? So that they could really see what is already obvious.
Agreed. Yeah. I was gonna say, but we're still in the hurricane season, and I think so part of the heat that we're feeling, correct me if I'm wrong, could be linked to the fact that we're still in hurricane season. I know September, October traditionally were the very active months for us. Dr. Williams, do you know if this is true, what I'm saying? But I think that from my recollection, I believe these are the more busy months for us.
Right, these are indeed the more busy months. We do expect around this time, however, lower temperatures. Around between 25 and 27 degrees Celsius, thereabouts on an average. But indeed, these days we're seeing summer temperatures 30 plus, 32, 34 degrees Celsius. So upwards of 90 plus Fahrenheit within this time frame. So that's, again, really cause for concerns.
For concern, definitely. See, somebody like me was thinking, oh, it's hurricane season. But Aiden, thank you for bringing up that point and for clarifying it, Dr. Williams, because I was just saying, oh, this is normal, it's hurricane season. Although I do look forward to our little chilly Christmas weather. We know Christmas decor once weather start to get cool, right?
Well, we will be getting some cool weather at the end of this week. I can tell you that based on our forecast. So we will look forward to some of that at the end of this week and over the weekend.
Well, thank you for that. We do look forward to that. All right, so we want to talk carbon footprint. What are we talking about? We have a little quiz that Aiden will walk us through shortly, but before we get into it, what do we mean when we say about reducing our carbon footprints?
Okay,
yeah, go ahead, Aiden.
So I'd like to tackle this one. So our carbon footprint, we always hear about this carbon footprint thing, and it's basically just how much, like the amount of carbon that we produce as individuals, as countries, based on the way how we live, right? So let's say of course, the most common example is I'm running my vehicle, my car, and this is emitting carbon. Carbon is a greenhouse gas, carbon dioxide. It goes up into the atmosphere, damages the atmosphere. We're always hearing this, right? But what people don't realize is that I have this pen here. This pen is made of plastic and rubber and ink and stuff. The production of this little pen, that caused a lot of carbon emissions, right? A lot of these gases are produced from little menial stuff like this, and that is what creates our carbon footprint. We run our AC that produces carbon, right? Things like this. So it's what we produce, the carbon that we produce on a daily basis, on an annual basis. That's our carbon footprint. So we're leaving that. And it's like leaving footprint in the sand. We're leaving a footprint in the atmosphere, right? So there's where that's kind of why it's like a metaphor, because we're leaving a mark, and this is the mark that we have to kind of reverse in a way, or maybe not reverse, but mitigate in any way possible. So I would like to move on to like how we can mitigate that, but I believe Ms. Diana, you would.
I think if I may, I think that's a very, very great description of what this carbon footprint is. And two key takeaways there was one, because the concept of carbon dioxide emission was abstract, right? And because it seems very disconnected from what I do daily. So yes, we do largely understand emissions as a result of using our cars and results of those, but there are other key things that we do on a daily basis that influences the carbon footprint and our contribution to these emissions, right? But the second thing was that we needed some tangible way of starting to reflect our individual, and as you indicate, the country and scaling up, what are our impacts to carbon dioxide emissions? And so the carbon footprint tries to reflect that and tries to use that as some underscore to, some scorecard, to give us an idea of what is my individual and therefore my family and therefore my country's carbon dioxide emission.
Yeah, thank you for that, Dr. Williams. Yes, that's good to know. So we'll do a quick quiz. I'll share the quiz from my screen and then we can talk through it. So we were talking about carbon footprint. So we have a quiz here that Aidan will lead us through tonight, where we look at whether we are carbon heroes or carbon villains. And it's a good measure for us to see some of the things that we're doing that we could probably do differently. Aidan, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, sure. So of course, with this test, I'll be completely honest, and I might even learn something about my own carbon footprint that I didn't know. So let's start. Okay, so my name. Okay, so this is our little friend Climate Bot. He's programmed to help us become a climate hero. So he's asking me for my name. Let's go with Aidan. Okay, so I'm a male. And let's start. Okay, some questions about my home. So I live in a 3-bedroom house. What kind of residence is it? It is a townhouse. In which decade was your house built? My house was built in 2014, so it would be. Sometimes the quiz doesn't allow you to click like at the bottom, so you would type in you would press the key that corresponds with the answer. So that's what I had to do just now. Question 4, what heating source does your building use? I do not have any heating. We live in a subtropical country. It doesn't get cold enough for me to need heat. Does your home have air conditioning? Yes, it does. My home does have air conditioning. Does the building have its own electricity generating system? So solar panels on the roof? We do not have those. Does your household use fossil-free electricity? An electricity contract without fossil fuels as solar delivers electricity from wind, solar, hydro. No.
No, we use a combination,
Yeah, we use a. So, are you actively trying to reduce your electricity consumption? For example, by choosing energy efficient products, turning off lamps, or by running washing machines and dishwashers on eco-friendly setting? Yes, we always do try to use more eco-friendly products, so like LED lights. If we, like stoves and refrigerators that don't need to consume too much energy. So this would be a yes. How many adults live in your household? So that's 18 and over, that's 3 of us. How many children live in your household? We have no children. How many pets live in your household? I have 3 dogs. Do you have a second property? I do not. Good job, you have finished part 1 of 3. Next, we've got a few questions about your traveling habits. Ooh. Okay, and that will be talking about flights, car rides, other motorized vehicles. Let's go. So how many flights do you take per year? That will be this first set. Domestic flights, of course, I've taken no flights. It's COVID, I don't want to be going anywhere. Flights to other parts of your continent, no flights. Intercontinental, no flights. How many cars does your household own or lease? We have 2 cars that we're using. Now we'll be asked about our car. What kind of engine does your car have? We use gas, petrol. How many kilometers is the car driven per year? So 1 mile equals 1.61 kilometers. And then it's asking me it's telling me if I have a hard time answering. Car typically is driven about 15,000 kilometers per year. If you have a company car, only count the kilometers driven for personal use. So it would be, since Belize is so small, we don't drive much anywhere, and it would be less than 10,000 kilometers. When was your car built? It's 2008, so that would be 05 to 09. It's a medium car. And then asking me about my second car, what kind of engine? That's gas. Same question about the distance, less than 10K. That was before 2005. That's a large car. And I am not part of a car sharing club. We do not rent either. I don't use taxis. That's gotta be real with that. I don't use taxis. How often do you take a ferry? I don't. How often do you use public transport? I haven't in a long time, so almost never. How often do you go by foot or bicycle? Almost never. I live in a rural area, so everywhere is so far. You can't walk, can't ride a bike to these places or to where you need to go. Is your household own or rent a motorbike? Nope. Moped or scooter? No. Motorboat? No. All right, well done. I finished part 2 of 3. Now they'll ask me some questions about my consumption habits. This is the crucial part. How often do you eat beef or lamb? I would say 1 to 2 days per week. How often do you eat a completely vegetarian meal, meaning meals free from meat, poultry, fish, and seafood? I have to be honest here, that's almost never. I love meat. Can't lie there. Do you consciously choose products that are seasonal? So this means that you choose fresh food that are readily available instead of frozen, conserved, or imported products. Example, prioritize apples, berries, and mushrooms in autumn. We don't really have like seasonal stuff like that, so I would say no. Do you consciously choose products that are locally sourced? So this means that you choose locally produced food instead of imported products. Consciously, no. I try, but conscious. Do you grow your own food? I've tried, but it's very difficult. But I've still tried, but it hasn't been enough to let me have a plate of my own produced food. So no there. Which statement best describes your attitude regarding food waste? So examples of food waste would be putting food on the plate but not eating it, throwing away leftovers from a meal, throwing away food that has passed its expiration date. My family would never want food to be wasted in this house, so I do my utmost to avoid food waste. What best describes your consumption of single-use plastic? So of course we know that single-use plastics are plastic bags, plastic bottles, plastic packaging for food, plastic cups, drinking straws, plastic cutlery. We do always try to avoid using single-use plastics. What best describes your consumption of palm oil? So palm oil is very cheap raw material that is used in a lot of industrial foods, including candy, crackers, cookies, Nutella, margarine. So we usually avoid palm oil. That's not something that I choose to consume. With statements about shopping fit you the best? So following questions. Concern purchases of all consumable goods that are not food, such as clothing, electronics, sporting equipment, cosmetics, and household appliances. Let's go. So my shopping frequency, I do shop every now and then, but it's not anything that I love or avoid. That's a perfect answer to that. Secondhand purchases. I do buy secondhand every now and then, but it's like nothing I think about much. These questions are very the answers are creepily perfect. They're giving away or selling secondhand items. I do give away when I have like clothes I don't use. I do give them away to the villagers and stuff in the village that I live. So I do give away. recycling. I do pretty often throw recyclable material in the general waste bin. Something I do. But yeah, I would say this is more for the most honest answer for that question. Do you offset any of your carbon footprint? So carbon offsetting means that you donate money to projects that reduce carbon dioxide emissions. These climate positive projects are most commonly in developing countries where the idea is to switch from fossil fuels to renewable energy, like solar and wind power, or to capture carbon dioxide by planting forests. Dr. Williams, do we do that here in Belize? Is it something that we yeah?
No, we don't.
I have a feeling. I had a feeling. So yeah, I'd never offset it. Okay, the results are in. But first,
let's see.
But first, you get to take a guess at your footprint. Ooh. A typical resident of the Western world has a footprint of 10 tons CO2e per year, and today's world average is 5 tons CO2e per year per person. To reduce the impacts from climate change, we have to get that average down to at least 2 tons CO2e per person by 2030. So based on the above, which category do you think you're in? If I were to take a guess, I would say that I'm a climate consumer. So I would be like 5 to 10 tons. I'm not a climate villain. I mean, more than 10 tons is a lot. That really is a lot. A climate friend, 2 to 5 tons. It's, I don't think, and climate hero, I really don't feel like I'm around those eras. But climate consumer, I would say I am a climate consumer. So my result was 7.7 tons CO2e. So yeah, it's saying I'm a climate consumer, but there are some things that you are doing well.
Thank you for that, Aiden. I think that really sheds some good light for us. I mean, I wasn't thinking that eating lamb and cow, beef, had anything to do with emissions. So maybe that is one of the points I'd like you to share with us, or explain for us before we segue, not segue, but we want to segue into Paris, the Paris conference. But we do also need to take a quick break. So if you could quickly just tell us how our beef factors into this climate change issue.
Yeah, again, it's something that we really do not think about. We don't realize because beef tastes so good, right? Beef and lamb, that really tastes good. So it's kind of hard to tell people, all right, you might have to remove this from your diet to help with the climate crisis. It's a very difficult thing to think about. But what we don't know, what we don't realize is when it comes to livestock production, cows produce a lot of methane, right? Which becomes a greenhouse gas, a natural gas that harms the atmosphere. So with having these gigantic pastures of cow, and they're just producing methane, and it just keeps going on and on and on every hour. It's like it's hard.
How do they produce methane? Is it from flatulence?
Flatulence.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay.
The cow flatulence. That's how they produce this natural gas, and of course that just floats up into the atmosphere and causes problems with the ozone layer and stuff like that. So again, it's something we have to realize and we have to think about, and we don't take it into consideration because beef tastes so good. Right?
Yeah. Oh, all right. Yeah, good. Thanks for that. I think that was a very valuable quiz. Good information. We'll take a quick break, and when we come back, Dr. Williams, I want to ask you a little bit more about Belize's mitigation adaptation measures and the whole Paris Climate Conference that's coming up. We'll take a short break, and we'll be right back with the Galen Hour.
I chose Galen because of its strong reputation.
Great scholarships.
I came because I can take all my classes online.
It is what I need to take me where I want to go.
I am very grateful for the wide range of support that helps me to do my utmost best.
Everything from peer mentoring, tutoring, student services, and the e-library.
I like the way my professors use non-traditional activities to evaluate my progress.
If you want to connect with your inner champion and make the world a better place, then Galen is right for you.
To learn more about our various programs, visit our website at www.galen.edu.bz or email us at admissions@galen.edu.bz.
Right, and we're back with the Galen Hour. Thank you for joining us tonight. We have with us tonight Dr. Kenrick Williams, CEO in the Ministry of Sustainable Development, Climate Change, and Disaster Risk Management, and Aidan Leslie, who is a student at Galen University in his third year, majoring in environmental science. He's also the president of the Environmental Club at Galen University. Welcome back, gentlemen, and welcome back to our viewing audience. So we want to start talking now about a report from the World Economic Forum. Well, not quite the report, but some of what it's saying to us. And it says that the failure to mitigate and adapt to climate change is the most impactful risk facing communities worldwide. Dr. Williams, what are we doing as a country to mitigate and to adapt to climate change?
Yeah, that's an excellent point and question for us to consider now, the impacts of climate change. So as a country, we've done a lot, especially as a small island developing state, as a forested country, we've done a lot in terms of mitigation. 60% of our country is forested. By nature of policy, 40% of our country is protected under protected status. And so we've done our fair share as a country in sequestering carbon. We have the second largest barrier reef, was also as part of our blue space. We are also sequestering the carbon in that space. So as a small island country, as a small island developing state, we're classified under the Paris Agreement. We've done a lot in terms of our fair share of reducing emission. In terms of adaptation to climate change, that is where the impacts of climate change affect countries like Belize. So you're increasing storms, the increasing frequency of these storms, the slow onset events, your floods, your coastal erosion. Now we have to look as a country, we're vulnerable to those impacts of climate change. And so that's where we have to focus in terms of building our adaptation, building our resilience to climate change. And so as a country, of course, we've been looking at the vulnerability of various sectors of climate change. We've been looking at vulnerability of various communities to climate change. So understanding, for example, the coastal communities and how they remain vulnerable, looking at our tourism sector and how is it vulnerable to climate change. Looking at our roadway system and our road network and how that is vulnerable to climate change. Belize City as a very community or a city below the
sea level,
sea surface level. So those are key things that we have to look at and build out now, or investments in adaptation. Of course, that costs a lot of money. Although there are some natural or some ecosystem-based adaptation mechanisms that we can put in place. And by that, I mean, we can now restore, for example, our coral reef ecosystems. We can restore our mangrove ecosystems. We can restore our riparian forest ecosystems to build out the natural mechanisms to adapt to the impacts, some of the impacts of climate change. But as we started with this conversation, the impacts are happening so fast and so frequent, so severe, that by natural adaptation mechanisms alone, we won't be able to build our resilience. And so we have to build out the great infrastructure. We have to build out drainage. We have to build out seawalls. We have to build out those infrastructures that will help our people to reduce its vulnerability. We have to build in our early warning systems, for example, for floods, to ensure that people can respond to disasters. So those are some of the things that we're doing on the side of adaptation, because climate change is real and we're seeing it daily. We're seeing it especially within a hurricane season. Now, a big part of the discussion, Diane and team, is that we're saying, hey, as a country, we've invested in mitigation. We've supported global mitigation, meaning because we've protected our forests, because we've protected our country, because we've kept our forestry or forest protected, not just Belizeans have benefited, but the world have benefited.
Definitely.
And because those developed countries have chosen to not mitigate the impacts of climate change, that means they have chosen to go the developing route. They've chosen to build out their industries, their agriculture sector, and all of those key areas. We are seeing the impacts of that. We're feeling the impacts of that. And so the ask is that we're going out there and say, hey, listen, you have to help pay for the adaptation for countries like Belize, because we're suffering, we're vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. While you and your people in developed countries, who of course are the major contributors to climate change, you are well off. You're well off economically, and your people can easily respond to climatic events, because of course, a lot of people are saying, well, we are also impacted by climate change. But when you look at how they can respond, when you look at how they're able to build up their resiliency, when you look at the US, for example, they build up their levees and their flood systems and their drainage systems, and we don't have the finances to do that. And so that is where we see the disparities in how we're affected by climate change. And so that's part of the global discussions that we're having now as part of the Conference of Parties COP.
Yes, good. I'm glad. Yes, so the COP26 takes place in November in Scotland, right? And for the viewing audience, the COP stands for the Conference of Parties, and the parties really refer to the countries, right? That are the UN countries that are, so we have about, correct me if I'm wrong, about 197 countries that are party, are participating to this, So it's really a global, conference. And we're attending it. What is it? Is it the second week of November?
It starts actually the first week of November with the World Leaders Summit. It's going to be the 1st and 2nd of November. We actually have some pre-sessional meetings that started today. So we have an advanced team that is already in Glasgow for technicians who are negotiating, and will be supporting negotiations for some of the key positions that are important for Belize. The actual conference starts on the 1st with the World Leaders Summit, 1st and 2nd, where our Prime Minister, John Briceño, will be giving the national statement and Belize's national position in terms of climate change. And thereafter, negotiations at the technical as well as political level will continue through to the 13th of November.
Yeah, sounds good. So, using the little quiz that Aiden just did, if we were to rank Belize, we would be a climate hero as a country because of the low.
Yeah, most certainly we would be a climate hero, and we may be a little bit of Mother Teresa in our process, because we're doing so much more than we contribute to in this global cog of climate change, and then the drivers of climate change. No? So we definitely be a climate hero, and that is important for us in these international negotiations, because Belize is a small drop in the bucket, small emissions, small population, small GDP, and so our negotiating voice in these discussions can be very small unless we associate and negotiate within critical blocks. So as part of the discussions that are coming up with COP, we're going in to say, hey, Belize is vulnerable to the impact of climate change. Belize is suffering significant damage. Our assessment showed that for ETA and IOTA, we suffered losses and damage of $100 million. That's one event, or two events within one season, right? And so when you look at the aggregate events, when you look at the significant droughts that are happening, when you look at the dry corridors that are occurring in the north of Belize, when you look at the other rains, every single rain event, NEMO has to respond to, and there's a cost to those response. So we're going out there and say we are vulnerable and we need to see adaptation. And so part of the discussion is that we want to make sure that countries will reflect ambition within their national determined contributions. That is, we want to see developed countries, which reflects about 80% of emissions, we want to see them seriously commit to reductions as part of what they promised within the Paris Agreement. to say that they're going to reduce this emissions and we're going to reduce temperature to below 2 degrees Celsius as compared to pre-industrial levels. So we want to see commitments, and we want to see real commitments as part of going forward. We want to see investments. We want to mobilize finance. We want to see commitments from developed countries to say we are going to support these countries that are vulnerable to the impacts of climate change to help build their resilience. But as I started earlier, I said, we a small drop in the bucket. And so we're doing this as part of certain negotiating blocks, as part of CARICOM, as part of the Alliance of Small Island Developing States, and then as part of G77, which is a group of 77 countries plus China. And that is our negotiating approach in trying to ensure that we reflect the position and the voice of Belize.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you explained it, because I was going to ask, who's negotiating for us? But there's who, but also we're negotiating along with in blocks. So as a Caribbean, as part of the group. So it's not us, just Belize standing out there screaming, we're really victims here. We really have not done a lot, but yet we're getting the backlash as a small nation sitting on a small island. Well, we're not an island, a small state that is really feeling the repercussions of what the bigger nations are doing. And we are offering so much more in terms of how we're protecting our environment. Is this where carbon credits come in as well, Dr. Williams? The fact that we are, and this is something that we are negotiating as well. The fact that we do not emit as much as other developing countries is a part of our negotiation.
Right. Well, as it relates to carbon credit, part of the discussion will be, again, as part of this year's COP26, there are some key items that we're trying to negotiate to finalize and to come to an agreement with for all countries so that we can move to implementation. The issue is that we have this Paris Agreement, but yet we're still negotiating pieces of it, right? Because X country did not agree with the amount of finances, or they did not commit the kind of finances they pledged. X country or group of countries want to renegotiate some article within the agreement. So we're hoping that we can come to terms with our commitments in this agreement so that we can move towards implementation. So one of the contentious issues that will be negotiated as part of this year's negotiation really is part of Article 6, which outlines certain things that have to do with more than just Article 6, a few of the articles within the Paris Agreement that has to do with how we treat with forests, how do we define in terms of carbon credits, what mechanism qualify that will allow us to track our credits. And I'm using this term carbon credits very loosely, but here we're referring to those emissions, those carbon dioxide that we reduce and we don't emit into the atmosphere, right? And that generally is what we refer to as a carbon credit. So it's not an actual tangible credit, but there are certain aspects of the negotiation that will influence how we treat with and how we value the amount of credits that we have. So if they say one of the negotiating area is that some countries want to include some negotiations before the Paris Agreement, and some things that qualified before the Paris Agreement, before 2015. If you're able to take that and put that in this new agreement, then it is to the detriment of a country like Belize and what we can sell in terms of carbon credit, right? And so that is why this is very heated and very critical negotiations for countries like Belize. And so Belize continue to defend this position to ensure that those things are not brought in, to ensure that no new country come in and try to influence and sidetrack and sort of literally throw a spanner in the wheel because they have new interests, because they, and those things are what really influences how we move forward.
Oh, definitely. So you all really have your hands filled, and hopefully we do emerge from this conference more hopeful and definitely pleased with the outcome. I know a lot of this is 6 years since the Paris conference. It's 2015, we're in 2021. So countries should have been developing their plans, I believe. So we go with our plan, and each country that goes has been strategizing. So I do believe everybody goes with something on the table that they would like to walk away with. No, so I do wish our contingent well. Our country really stands to suffer if we're not able to get some of the things that we need to keep mitigation and adaptation going. I know for a long time, monies has been discussed and been putting aside money and assisting countries like ours. Is that still a reality? Have the larger countries held up their end of the deal to actually committing monies to this cause?
That's a very, very important point, a very key negotiating point for all developing countries this year. Countries have committed $100 billion annually to support countries, vulnerable countries like Belize, to build out their resilience to climate change, to address issues of adaptation to climate change.
Mm-hmm.
Of that 100 billion, they have only delivered about 20% of that, and only 2% of that come to small island developing countries. So could you imagine? We are vulnerable, yet we're having no access to finance. The finance that we do have access to comes with a whole lot of strings. So it's very difficult to access. It's very cumbersome. There's, and so this year, a key part of the negotiation again is, listen, for CARICOM, for AOSIS, and the other negotiating bloc that we negotiate under, we're saying you have to be serious about the commitments as it relates to financing for developing countries. And so we're establishing, as part of the negotiation, a floor of $100 billion per year that must flow to these countries through the Green Climate Fund and through the Adaptation Fund, which are specialized vehicles which were set up to help our countries like ours access financing. And so we're trying to ensure that those funds are capitalized so countries like Belize can have access to them. But we have special circumstances that we also need to push that, to ensure that okay, even within our negotiating bloc, that we still can access those financing, no?
Yes, definitely. So I mean, I really, really hope that we do walk away from these negotiations with funds as well, or at least with funds earmarked that will come our way, because we really are feeling the brunt of it. And like you said, we are climate heroes. We have not contributed to this destruction that our brothers and sisters have helped to create. But we are pleased that we can contribute to improving it. At the same time, we do need help. So you all really have your hands filled. I know it's quite an interesting contingent that's going. You said some have already left.
Yes.
I take it you will be going, Dr. Williams?
Yes. So I serve as the deputy head of delegation. The head of delegation, of course, will be at first the Prime Minister, and upon his departure, Minister Orlando Habet will be the head of the delegation. And we have a very interesting and dynamic team. This year, we're treating this thing, and this, I think, reflects the seriousness of this thing for the current government, in that we're trying to take a sort of whole of government approach to it. The Ministry of Finance is going very critical as part of the discussion. The Ministry of Economic Development, the Ministry of Sustainable Development, Climate Change and Disaster Risk, the Attorney General Ministry, and of course, the Prime Minister at the highest level, and the Ministry of the Blue Economy. And so no longer is just a climate change issue, a Ministry of Environment issue, but we're really trying to take this from a very integrated approach. And so the Ministry of Finance is going to support our negotiation in terms of some of those financing, new financing, innovative financing, addressing and highlighting things like our blue bond and things that we've done there, and opportunities for carbon credits. Of course, the Ministry of Blue Economy will support that discussion and to highlight and showcase that we have been a leader, while we serve with other Caribbean brothers and sisters in terms of being within the blue space and have similar ocean ecosystems. We've done it different, and we dare say we've done it better. And so we want to highlight that at the global level, to say that, when you come and support and invest in Belize, it's a very different brand that you're getting. Our carbon credits are not just credits, are just carbon reductions from any. We're talking about jaguar reserves, we're talking about protected areas, we're talking about ecosystem, we're talking about community-driven approaches, private sector-driven approaches. So we hope to not just go out there, or the plan is not just to go out there and negotiate that part of the agreement and ensure that our interests are safeguarded, but that we highlight on the global stage the difference that this country has made and that our people have made, the sacrifices that they have made, we intend to really scale up our global participation in the discussions. And so we're going for the chairmanship of some critical positions, so that at the end of the day,
very good. Yes,
the global discussion. No? So
that's very good. I really wish our contingent well, and all the best to you, Deputy Head of Mission. You all really have an important task at hand. Gentlemen, this has been such an interesting conversation. We're limited to an hour, unfortunately, so we do want to wrap up. I'd like to ask Aiden if you want to say some few last words, and then Dr. Williams will come back to you for some words, and then we'll end our session. Aiden, do you want to quickly give any last words?
Yes, definitely. I would, of course, like to thank you, Miss Diana and team, for giving me this opportunity, and to you, Dr. Williams, so we could talk about what's really going on in our country and what's going on in our world environmentally. And there is one quote that I have here that really helps to tie up what we're doing to our planet, right? It's from Dr. Jane Goodall, who is from the University of Cambridge. She said, "It doesn't make any sense if you think we're the most intellectual creatures on the planet that we're destroying our only home." Right? We don't have anywhere else to go, and we really need to put back the care and attention into our planet that it has been losing.
Yes, very impactful message. We as humans are making creating the most damage. Thank you, Aiden. Dr. Williams?
Well, equally, I want to thank you, Ms. Diana, and the Galen team for having me. It's really always excited coming back to anything that's Galen, but still being part of the family. But also, this is, I think, is a very critical issue. It's not just an environmental issue, it's an economic issue, it's a social issue, it's an institutional issue. And I think it's important that all of our students understand, and the broader Galen community understand the importance for each and every one of us. And so I want to also, before I leave, ask them to lobby your politicians, to write to your ministers, to write to your respective representatives, discuss with them and highlight with them opportunities through which we can build understanding for climate change, and how the cities and municipalities and other communities can really integrate considerations for climate change. So I think for a long time, we've talked about our individual impact, and we saw some of the discussions with the quiz that we did earlier, but I think it's now time for us to scale up and get people to consider, at the broader level, some of the things that we can do to support this process.
Definitely. Gentlemen, thank you so very much. Dr. Williams, hopefully when you come back from COP26, we have an opportunity to talk again. Aiden, thank you so much for your contribution. And we'll take a break now, and when we come back, we'll do a wrap up.
Galen University is offering a Masters of Science in Development Studies program beginning this spring semester, January 2022. For more information on how to apply, email us at admissions@galen.edu.bc or call us at 615-3129.
Welcome back to the final segment of the Galen Hour. This is really just me wrapping up and telling you thank you so very much for joining us tonight. We're here every night at 7:30, every Thursday night at 7:30. That was a really interesting conversation. There was so much more we could talk about. We just did not have time. Hopefully when Dr. Williams returns from COP26, he gives us some more of his time. And Aiden, we'd like to have Aiden back as well. So thank you for joining us. We ask you all to do your part. We're all in this together. This earth it is ours to protect and to preserve. So on that note, I say thank you and good night.
Watering the western gardens, where our students now excel, reaching higher, sister, brother, ever pacing one another, visions glow.